more. I actually feel like we should just suspend the hearing and get a lecture on the Ukraine and some advice as to what we ought to do. It might actually be more helpful to Congress, but you know, in the interest of well, somehow we ought to get into that in the Q&A if somebody wants to throw a question.
Didn't stop us yesterday.
But that's exactly right. And so with that, I'm going to yield to my friend and the ranking member, Ms. Wasserman Schultz, for any remarks she might care to make.
Thank you so much, Dr. Billington. Welcome, welcome back to the committee. It's no secret my affection for the Library of Congress and for your stewardship. Congratulations on 27 years as librarian. You have an international reputation, and I stand with Chairman Cole in that perhaps we could call that there are perks to this job, Mr. Chairman, and you know, maybe we can gather the subcommittee back together so we can hear from Dr. Billington on what's really going on in Ukraine. During the hearing, I do want to just explore some of the issues that have arisen with the Copyright Office, and I know the Register of Copyrights is here with us, and we'll have a chance to talk to her as well. But as you know, we, Mr. Chairman, I think you were on the committee when we were dealing with a really significant backlog of registering copyrights, and that has been largely cleared out. But given the drop in funding during the sequester, as well as you know, some administrative issues, it's potentially becoming a problem once again, among some other things. So I'd love to you know, to talk to you about that as well, and just hear from you on your budget request, because you are a robust advocate for the library, and we know that the library has needs. I'm concerned about what you've had to cut back on in recent years, and I know your request is modest. Oftentimes the agencies in recent years have come back to us with more realistic, modest requests, which we appreciate, but we also really need to get a sense of what your needs are, and if you didn't have these severe constraints of the sequester, what you find imperative to proceed forward with funding. So thank you, Mr. Chairman. Look forward to
Thank you. Dr. Billington, your entire statement will be made part of the record, as well as the statements of the Register of Copyrights and the Director of Congressional Research Service. At this point, please summarize and highlight the accomplishments of the library for the past year, and offer whatever thoughts you care to offer on your budget.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, Mr. Chairman, first of all, I welcome Chairman Cole back to the subcommittee now as chair, and thank Ranking Member Ms. Wasserman Schultz for her continuing support and good counsel, and indeed this entire supportive subcommittee. We look forward to working with you to realize the full potential of what is in fact the world's greatest library for the creative future of the United States in a very fast-changing world. The Library of Congress fiscal 2015 budget request represents, as you indicated, Mr. Chairman, $14.2 million or 2.3% increase over the library's fiscal 2014 funding level. This request includes no program increases for the library and is exclusively for mandatory pay and price level increases anticipated for fiscal 2015. The Library of Congress has the largest and most wide-ranging collection anywhere, both of the world's recorded human knowledge and of the cultural and intellectual creativity of the American people. This is an enormous and growing asset for the United States in an increasingly knowledge-dependent world. It was created, been sustained by the Congress for 214 years, and the library has encouraged, protected, and preserved America's free creativity through the work of the Copyright Office since 1871, and has also been the Congress's primary research arm through the Congressional Research Service for 100 years, and for 182 years through the nation's largest law library. Now, over the past several years, the library has been operating with progressively decreasing resources. Our total appropriations declined in excess of 12.5% from $684.3 million in fiscal 2010 to $598.4 million in fiscal 2013. between fiscal years 1992 and 2014, the library built our now massive digital outreach alongside our still growing analog library. However, our FTEs decreased during the same period by 1,389. That is a 30.5% loss in FTEs. So we're doing more with less, precisely because our staff has such one-of-a-kind skills. We minimized making budget cuts in our staff pay budget, administering only a 3-day library-wide furlough for all staff in fiscal 2013. Nevertheless, substantial attrition continues and is resulting in growing knowledge and other gaps. Now, moving into fiscal 2014 with the prospect of continued sequestration budget reduction, the library was deeply concerned about absorbing additional cuts in our core program activities or burdening our staff with another series of furlough days. Thus, the library very much welcomed receiving some relief in the fiscal 2014 omnibus appropriation, including the partial restoration of sequestration reductions and also funding for the construction of Fort Meade's Module 5, which will provide critically needed storage space for preserving and making accessible the library's incomparable collection. Now, despite the challenging budget environment, the library's uniquely experienced, dedicated, and multi-talented staff is looking boldly into the future for what we can do better and more inexpensively for America in the rapidly changing, unpredictable times that we're living in now and lie ahead. So, Mr. Chairman, the Congress of the United States has been the greatest patron of the library in history. Each year, the library is privileged to serve every member of Congress, every congressional committee, millions of Americans, often in ways that would otherwise be unavailable to them. All of the library's present and future work must and will be, first, directly important for the United States, and not just for our own institution, as well as, secondly, serve the public in ways that no one else can do as well or better. The library embodies and advances the distinctive American ideal of a knowledge-based democracy, and we'll be grateful for your consideration of our budget request for 2015. So, Mr. Chairman, Ms. Wasserman Schultz, let's see now, Mr. Moran, Dr. Harris, Mr.
All the rest.
Mr. Bishop, I know down. So all of you and the other members of the subcommittee, we thank you for your good counsel and support for the library. So.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Billington, Dr. Billington, I should say, and always appreciate your testimony. We're going to call on some of your team for a number of things, and as I mentioned yesterday when I had the privilege of serving under my good friend, then Chairman Wasserman Schultz, I got to do whatever I wanted to do on this committee. I got to ask any question I wanted to ask, go any place. Now I have a script, and I no longer have the freedom which she granted me as a member of this committee. But so I want to actually direct, Mr. Dizard, my first question to you. In House Report 112-148, which accompanied the fiscal year 2012 appropriation bill, the committee spoke to our continuing support of the information technology services segment of your budget, of which this fiscal year you're seeking $108 million. The committee believes that enhanced Office of Strategic Initiative and Information Technology is critical to ensuring that all library programs and services continue to meet the challenges and opportunities before them. The committee recognizes that the major information technology requirements of the library's organizations can and will only be met through library-wide collaboration. The committee directed the librarian to consider managing within the Office of the Librarian Information Technology planning and resource allocations to ensure that information technology requirements are properly prioritized and all resources are effectively used. Mr. Dizard, what actions have you taken regarding the language and the concern expressed in that report?
Okay, Mr. Chairman, we not only considered that the committee's language, but really have moved in the direction that the committee suggested. And I there's some major areas of technology work that are now being directed and managed by the librarian's office. I am personally involved in each of them. I can give a few examples. I guess the primary one, which we started right about the time of the committee report language, was to consolidate all of our library's web presence into a single web governance board, which I chair. I'll give you one example of the work that we've done there. On congressional information, we had separate systems for our Thomas was one system with a separate platform run by one organization. The LAS system had its own platform run by CRS at that time. Thomas was run by the law library. Each of those systems was very fragile and not able to be updated quickly. We, through the merging of the technology people with the subject matter expert people, have now put our congressional information on a single platform and with greater functionality. And frankly, as the committee directed, the central management really has permitted us to greatly improve our web presence. The organizations would not have been able to do these separately, minus the kind of direction of the librarian's office. You probably heard about the Twitter archive, where the librarian's office is actively involved in that. Again, bringing reference librarians together with technology experts. We're now indexing over 21 billion tweets in the 2006 to 2010 archive. We hope to make that available for initial research in June. We also have worked on a central geospatial information system for the library. We were going in directions of each individual organization developing their own system. The librarian's office has combined that into one business case and one business plan. There even be some legislative agencies participating in that program. We've also, another example, right now we're consolidating mobile devices across the library. They were all separate contracts. Now they'll be in a single contract, greater cost efficiencies in administration. So we've made efforts there. I will say that we do need to apply this approach to other program areas. My own opinion is that we have many common needs across the library with our different organizations, and we must meet them with shared services, centrally provided for services for all organizations. And our success in technology is ultimately going to be about how we manage. It's really a management question, it's not a technology question. And I think the direction of the committee and where we're going now in terms of a shared services approach will really determine our level of success. Dr. Billington mentioned the Futures program. Through that, we will develop a strategic information technology plan, and from that, we'll determine the best organizational makeup for the library, including what happens with OSI and other people.
Well, I know staff shortages have complicated many of your efforts. It's our understanding that Director of the Office of Strategic Initiatives, which we assume, or I assume, would be the Chief Information Officer, has been vacant for almost 2 years. Could you speak first to that, and then how do you deal with something, a position that critical that's vacant that long? Right.
It's been vacant. It's been there have been acting directors in there who are very capable, and we've decided that, as I mentioned before, to look at the whole organizational structure of IT at the library once we develop the IT strategic plan for the future, and that will determine what happens with OSI. I did not want to lock in a central or the existing organization, how we're organized in terms of IT for the future. But I say, as I said in the beginning, even though we've had acting people in there, we haven't missed a beat. I frankly think we're working better together collaboratively across the library.
Yeah, now, if I understand your answer correctly, you don't currently have a strategic information technology plan, but you're working toward one. What's your timeline, or what's the state of that?
Dr. Billington's timeline for the Futures program is that we will develop these and have this game plan by the end of August. So we have an information technology plan now in terms of just what we normally do as a library and our individual units do. It needs to be updated and this shared services approach executed in it. That's our challenge now.
Thank you very much. Ms. Wasserman Schultz?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Billington, wanted to just touch base with you about something that I know is near and dear to your heart, and that is preservation of the collection. In your FY 2015 budget justification, the program for preservation of books, specifically mass deacidification, is you're going to be transitioning that program, as far as I understand, and going to a multi-year new contract. This is a program that was affected deeply during sequestration. Were you able to, in this plan, restore some of the cuts and the components of the program that were dramatically affected from the fiscal year 24 prior to the fiscal year 2014 appropriation? And also, just if you could discuss with us the effect of the new contract and how many new titles need to be preserved through deacidification, and how many will the new contract require to go through that process?
Yeah, well, I think I'll want to bring in our Director of Preservation to get into some of the details.
Please.
But there's no question that this has been reduced. We used to do, about 290,000 a year. That's been reduced to about 100,000. What we have, this is a complex and difficult problem, but we do far more. This is extremely important, and this is an area of unique importance because nobody else is doing this at anything like this degree. So this is a service for the nation, preserving. Most people don't realize that almost everything on which both knowledge and creativity is recorded and preserved since about the middle of the 19th century is on perishable material. And incidentally, zeros and ones on a magnetic tape, which is the ultimate physical point, or on some other substance, is also even more. There's almost an inverse correlation. The oldest things we have on which knowledge and creativity are recorded, the stone stelas in China from the 3rd millennium BC, or cuneiform writing from Middle Asia. Those are quite permanent, whereas as you go forward, you get more and more impermanence. Now, it's the price of a democratic and a mass civilization which everybody produces, but the deacidification of paper has been the thing that the library has championed for a long time, been very effective at, but there aren't many other people doing it. And so it's a particularly crucial thing, and I'll let Mark here, our excellent new Director of Preservation, fill in the details. But there's no question that part of our charge is to preserve this unique universal collection for future generations. And this is becoming more and more important as the world becomes more and more knowledge dependent. So Mark?
Well, I would say that our mass deacidification plan has been to treat.
Could you state your full name for the record?
Mark Sweeney, Director
Thank
of
you.
Preservation. Thank you. So the mass deacidification plan for the library has been to treat 8.5 million volumes and 30 million manuscript sheets over a 30-year period from fiscal 2001 to 2030. The quantities were determined in the late 1990s based on a belief that about 30% of the book collection would be on acidic paper that would still be treatable. And that the library would acquire approximately 100,000 new works every year that would be on acidic paper that would need to be treated. In total, so far, we've addressed more than 3.7 million books and 10.9 million manuscript sheets from the collection, and we're only 13 years into the program. During the past 10 years, the library has averaged deacidification of approximately 290,000 books per year and slightly more than 1 million sheets per year. Recently, we did reduce that quantity to 220,000 units per year books and 900,000 units for the manuscript sheets. But despite the success of this program, our sound program management requirement is that we calibrate large preservation programs in light of new developments in the field. And to that need to look at programs, we commissioned a study by the Federal Research Division at the library to look at what Association of Research Library member institutions were doing with deacidification. So this benchmarking opportunity for us to find out where we stand in the rest of the community and understand what options we might have and what directions they're taking. And what this study revealed was that the number of institutions that are using deacidification is declining, especially since 2008. Only 15 out of the 87 research libraries surveyed currently use mass deacidification for bound volumes, and only 11 currently use mass deacidification for unbound materials. Those would be manuscript sheet-like material. We also found that the library accounts for the largest percentage of volumes being preserved through mass deacidification. In 2008, the library accounted for about 77% of the total volumes being treated. Today, the library accounts in 2012, or at the end of the year, the library accounted for 96% of the volumes being treated. This is the estimate from the Federal Research Division from this ARL survey. All right. Also spending. Obviously, ARL members are spending less than $100,000, and we're spending $6.1 million per year. So this is a program that is in need of calibration. Another concern is we surveyed the parts of the collection that would need to be worked from in the next 5 years. They're all severely overcrowded areas, which will prevent us from efficiently working through that collection. There's also areas that have a lack of inventory control. So at this time, it looks like the prudent thing to do would be to reduce the quantity of material that we're targeting for the next 5 years to about 100,000 volumes per year. But look to try to increase the number of manuscript sheets that are being treated per year.
Would the goal still be to deacidify all documents and publications that need deacidification?
Our resurvey of the collection, we have about 11 million items that have not yet been reviewed for deacidification, books from the collection. We estimate that about 3.7 million are on acidic paper that could be treated. We also know that 16% of what we looked at was so severely embrittled that it could not be treated. And we'll need to reformat that material. And at this point right now, the library does not have a digital reformatting program for books. So a hope would be that by taking a look at this program and reducing some of what we're spending on this, we could use to put into a brittle book program so that we can ensure that at-risk material can be accessible.
Mr. Chairman, I have questions for the Register of Copyright. I don't know if you want me to go through with those, forward with those now.
How long do you think that'll, why don't we give Mr. Harris an opportunity, if that's okay?
Okay.
Okay. Mr. Harris?
No, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and I'll just be very brief, because we'll have other questions we need to ask. You know, the charge of the committee overall is to actually flat, the discretionary budget remains flat from last year, once you take into account the change in veterans' pensions that we've already made. If you couldn't get an increase, if you couldn't get the 2.4% increase, what would the plans be? How would you deal with that?
Well, we would just simply have to reassess generally, because this is a pretty lean request given the immense needs. This is just one dimension of it, of the needs, and well, I suppose the simplest thing we could do, although we'd have to discuss it and see how to handle it, would be that we just couldn't repair the damage that was done by the reductions in the sequestration. But that's that would be a pretty serious thing. I mean, I can't. I'll give you a written answer if you want one. But that would be the first thing we'd have to consider, whether we could pass on that or we'd have to maintain. But the prioritization of I mean, everybody's suffered losses, staff losses, particularly being the most important. Everything depends. We have a big futures program, which is all being done on time entirely by our own staff, without the distractions and the added expense of consultants. This staff has enormous continuity of experience and dedication, and so we would hope to be able to have this complete. We will have it completed by August 30th, so that we'll be able to apply our conclusions to the next fiscal year, and at the same time to lay the basis for our overall strategic plan, including the IT. What can be done centrally, more efficiently, and what are the special things that special needs? Now, in the business of determining how we deal with the increase that the consolidated budget presented us, modest ones, we gave preference to copyright and CRS, which received 50%, whereas the other, and the National Service for the Blind and Physically Handicapped, those three all received 50%, whereas the others, the rest of library services and law library and so forth, only received 37%. So this would be, there isn't much give. But what we're doing really with this futures plan is consultative entirely with the staff itself to present a systematic projection in extremely fast changing times. What can we do that is permanent and safe, and on the basis of that develop a new strategic plan, including the IT, excuse me, and anticipating the questions that both you and Mrs. Watson and Schultz have in fact raised about defining what it is that we really need that we can bring forward in the following fiscal year. So that's about where we stand. I mean, I'm happy
Thank
that.
you. No, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Moran?
Thank you, Chairman. I've been on this subcommittee for several years, maybe more than anybody. And I guess I've probably asked about all the questions that I have in me, but I want to take the time to make a couple of points. One, a general point about the budget itself, because I fully support this budget request. But I think it ought to be underscored what you're actually asking for. The fact that it's a 2.3% increase means that it's just barely paying for the cost that we are already incurring under this year's operating costs. So there's no expansion, and in some areas there'll be very moderate reductions. But I think it's important to point out what you did, Mr. Billington, that over the last, well, even from FY10 to FY13, it went from 684 million down to less than 600 million. I mean, a 12.5% cut is a big cut. Now, maybe we thought we could get away with it because nobody really fully understands or appreciates what the Library of Congress does. But we're going to pay a price for that. And the other thing that I thought was really impressive, for 23 years now, the library has built this massive digital outreach, and I give you a lot of credit, Jim, for doing this, because it was an analog library. We would have been so critical of it if it had not modernized, and yet you've done it at the same time that you've reduced your workforce by about 1,400 people. Now, we heard from the GPO, the Government Printing Office, yesterday, and they made, I thought, a compelling point that in order to digitize, oftentimes it requires more resources, more people. And yet we've digitized this massive collection of information at the same time that we cut the budget and we've significantly cut the workforce. So that needs to be pointed out. And I also want to make some note of the people that are sitting around us here. These are all professionals in their field, top flight professionals. They work for us, more importantly, they work for our constituents. And they do an extraordinarily fine job. So they really deserve a lot of credit, and they go unnoticed, and for the most part, we never see them except an opportunity like this. So we want to say thank you to all of you. Now, the second point is this Open World Institute. I think it's a very important program, this lesson, I shall say. I'll make no more personal references, but we have some disagreements here. But it's had bipartisan support. It's brought 20,000 people, future leaders, to the United States. It's the kind of thing that we can only measure qualitatively. It's not the kind of thing you can really measure quantitatively, because it's a long-term investment. And the principal reason we're doing it is to bring about a more fair and just judicial system in Russia under democratic governance. We've got to deal with Russia. We could not be more aware of that today with what's happening in Ukraine. We need to not just be able to communicate with Putin, but more importantly, there needs to be people in Russia who get it, who understand what our long-term objectives are, because we're going to continue to trade with Russia. They have enormous deposits of natural resources. Europe needs to be able to trade with them. And now, I know recently there's well, I will be specific, Debbie, because I think it's a very legitimate point that the State Department should be doing this. You know, that's a substantive discussion, and so nobody's necessarily right or wrong on it, but we think this is a way to kind of go around the institution of the State Department, that perhaps have a little more credibility, that sometimes the State Department carries with it a certain amount of baggage for all of the diplomatic positions that it has to take. And as we all know, and some better than others, politics is all about personal relationships, and this is about personal relationships. So this, I think it's a small investment. I appreciate Chairman Cole putting it back in, but it's an argument that needs to be made, and I do give credit to people whose judgment we respect greatly to have raised the issue. But I hope that we'll be able to continue, because we have this asset at the Library of Congress that is to some extent is more greatly appreciated in Russia than he is here in the United States. One of the world's foremost experts on Russian literature and culture, and so we want to take advantage of that. Anyways, this is it's an important program. I hope we can continue it, but I know we're going to have another robust discussion, and it'll be a substantive discussion because the people involved are substantive, good people who want to do what's right. But I hope the end result is that we can continue to fund Open World and do so even more robustly. So that's my time that has been taken up. Tom, I said I wasn't going to ask any questions. I've asked all the questions over the years that might be asked. But
it sounds like you have some of the answers now, too. So.
Well, I sort of have opinions. I have opinions.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You bet. Thank you, my friend. Ms. Roby?
Chairman and ranking member, I just want to say it's an honor to serve on this committee, and I look forward to, of course, working with all of you. Dr. Billington, you touched on the Futures program, library-wide, to get to some potential solutions or the future for the library by December 31, 2015. Can you just lay out for us a little bit more specifically what a brief overview of the program and what you envision is the end result of the investment of these efforts, and what you plan to do with them and how you hope it helps?
Yeah, this is to provide a blueprint for the 21st century for how to perform the library's service to Congress and the American people in order to, the question is, the fundamental question is, how do you sustain and make useful the largest curated collection in human history of both the world's recorded human knowledge in almost all languages, 470, and the independent intellectual and cultural creativity of the American people, thanks largely to copyright deposit and all the other riches that we have. I won't give you the statistics, but this is a one-of-a-kind institution, and it is being developed by a one-of-a-kind staff. I'm glad that Mr. Moran pointed to the quality. This is a very experienced, diversely talented, highly dedicated staff without the expense, the distraction of outside consultants. Preparatory work's already been done by 72 people below the executive committee level. So we have a rich preparatory work that's been done, and the librarian's office has also, on a parallel track, been assessing overall additions, as our great deputy here has outlined to you, the question of digital activities, information, how we organize it, and how we conceive of it and focus it, and also space usage in the 3 buildings here on Capitol Hill. The librarian's office will produce by the end of April the first draft of this suggested plan, which we will share with you so you can survey it. We will then be reviewed, revised where appropriate by the executive committee of the library and issued in final form so that implementation can begin in fiscal 2015. Now, starting this month and throughout the whole formation and implementation of this program, the library will continually seek the advice and be shaped by the decisions of the Congress. Any suggested changes or innovations will be as cost neutral as possible. We hope to realize both new synergies and new economies as we aim to bring together and prioritize our vast digital resources. We have not only the more than 30 million items of American history and culture with curatorial comment that's been widely used for educational and inspirational purposes in the school system and even in homes around America. We also have, I think, about 6.5 petabytes of digital information produced elsewhere on this National Digital Information Infrastructure Program, which is mandated by the Congress. So starting this month, as I say, and right through till the end of August, we will again attempt to bring together and prioritize the vast analog and digital resources in ways that do 2 things. Are important, demonstrably important for the United States, not just for this institution, in our increasingly knowledge-dependent world, both at home and abroad, and also are not being done as well or better by any other institutions. You will have a systematic look at the many things. You can do an infinite number of things with the resources, both material and human, that the Library of Congress has. What answers those 2 questions? And I'd just like to say in conclusion that our people, which is what we've tried to support most importantly, because everything depends on them, and they are, I can tell you, extraordinary. They embody as well as serve America's identity as a knowledge-based democracy in which everyone has a chance and everyone plays. So I believe, like America itself, that there's a unique capacity for a country that this institution, the oldest federal cultural institution, will be able to become, and the total creation of the Congress of the United States, which his vision has sustained it, will be able to both honor its past, preserve the values of the book culture, the dialogic values of the book culture which created this country, while innovating and accepting and sorting out the vast tsunami and creating knowledge navigators for the future that will help all aspects of American education at home and American broader foreign policy, reflecting our better angels of our nature, as Lincoln put it, abroad. So we're going to honor the past, innovate for the future, and we'll clear it with this committee as well as the Joint Committee on the Library and other committees to whom we return. So that's what we're planning to do, and I think that you have the opportunity of only a modest increase now, but I think can guarantee you we'll lay it all out, what we can do, because really there's almost so many things we could do. I don't want to repeat myself, Mr. Chairman, but that's a brief, rough outline for the.
I want to continue to go back and forth in a bipartisan fashion, so if Mr. Amidei and Mr. Stewart will hold for a second, I want to particularly go back. Mr. Wiseman-Schultz had some questions, and I think it's very important for this committee to hear that discussion on the copyright issue.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If, Dr. Billington, if we can have the Register of Copyright, Ms. Galante, come to the table.
Yes, sure. Yeah, very good.
Thank you very much. Welcome.
Thank you.
I had mentioned in my opening statement that the Judiciary Committee is going through a review of the copyright laws, and oftentimes we get a little frustrated in the Appropriations Committee that substantive policy changes are made and we're not kept in the loop, and then we're expected to come up with funding or address funding shortfalls, or the opposite, come up with funding for things that we were not a part of deciding. So I want to make sure that we're up to speed on everything you're dealing with. Register Galante, I know that there's a bit of a rub between copyright owners and making sure that their materials are protected and giving access to the public to those materials. That's a natural, normal rub, but it seems that it might have reached a little bit of a more challenging situation at the library, because the two functions of the library might be at odds with one another. Can you address specifically what role the Register has in deciding what specifically goes to the library's collections and how that process works? And I have a number of other questions to address challenges that have arisen.
Thank you, Ranking Member. Good morning, Mr. Chairman. So that's the 21st century question, and I would, if you don't mind, frame it at a little higher level, which is that, as you said, the copyright law is showing some of the strain of its age, in that much of it was negotiated in it was enacted in 1976, negotiated in the 50s and 60s. So we shouldn't be surprised that it's showing some strain. And then we have a DMCA digital overlay that happened in 1998, again, in internet years. That's a really long time ago. So we have some natural issues that are kind of bubbling up, and in serving the Judiciary Committees, whom I work with very closely, we're looking at issues like, are authors protected on the internet? Do we need to recalibrate their exclusive rights so that it's clearer that they have control on the internet? Do we need to also update exceptions, say, for libraries? So we are very much a neutral arbitrator in the policy space, and sometimes it's true that the Library of Congress is it's both our parent organization and sometimes a stakeholder in those discussions. So we have to be very careful. When it comes to deposits for the library's collection, we have two very specific functions. Both of them I would put into that larger spectrum of we should expect to have to look at them, because they're part of the greater copyright system and also haven't really been looked at for many decades. So one is registration, and in that, which I think you may be referring to, people are registering their works with us for protection. And in order to do that, we require that they send us a deposit. That deposit may be selected by the Library of Congress. We have guidelines and regulations that affect that. It doesn't necessarily mean that the library can make that work accessible to the public, particularly if it's a work that is being sold on the open marketplace. So we are now in the space of trying to figure out how digital affects that relationship, and we probably have to recalibrate it. We are feeling the strain in registration in a couple of ways. The usability of the system is a little frustrating. It was implemented in 2007 after, I think, a 5 or 6 year planning period. And I think it's a very good first generation of services, but it's by no means state of the art today. And so how do we make it better? Well, on the one hand, I have a library that has often relied on deposits for its collection. On the other hand, I have copyright owners saying, I'm very concerned about the security of the deposit. I'm not sure I can register it, give you a copy without knowing about your data security for the deposit. I'm also concerned that it's expensive, that it's a little clunky, and maybe wouldn't it be better if we could register using an app on a mobile device? Isn't that how people are using content? So I think we have to reconcile those two things, and I think it's not a surprise to me that we have to reconcile those two things, but I think it's really hard.
So in that same vein, I know the library, and this is a unique relationship that the
Yes.
Copyright Office has with the library, because they essentially submit your budget. But I'm not sure how much communication there is, and obviously it's a world of competing priorities, but
Yeah.
the library has understandably, at our direction really, kept increases and requests to inflationary costs and limited in a challenging economic environment what they've asked for. It's the politics is the art of the possible. But given the IT challenge that you just alluded to and the need for IT upgrades, all of which you just described would be included and made a part of, it's kind of shocking that in 2014 that we haven't caught up yet, or that we're not investing in ensuring that we catch up. So can you give us a sense, I mean, what are the resources that you need for fiscal year 2015 that would invest in projects that bring us up to speed? And do you have the authority to charge fees to cover those improvements? Would that have to be funded through appropriations? And what about the registration system in general? We've had a backlog that we were able to deal with. My understanding, I'm kind of asking all my questions at once. My understanding is...
That's a shrewd strategy.
Yeah, I know. I've been at this a little while now, Mr. Chairman. My understanding is that you've lost staff. Well, we were able to ramp up and add staff to
Yes.
deal with the backlog, and for the members that haven't been on the committee, I mean, it was a backlog of years. And we transitioned to an e-system so that we could speed up the registrations. But the e-system took a long time to transition to train the staff so that they would know how to use it. And then we've subsequently lost some of those staff. And so how has that impacted the wait time?
Okay, thank you again for the questions. I'll answer the backlog question first and the staffing question and then the fee question, if that's okay.
Sure.
The backlog is definitely creeping up. So I should say I was appointed by Dr. Billington June 1st of 2011. And the backlog was almost under control at that point. So it's complete testament to the extra hours and work ethic of the Copyright Office staff and the support of the library to attack that backlog. It had some consequences, one of which is we now have to look at the accuracy of the registrations that were pushed through, for lack of a better phrase. And so we are updating the compendium of practices to make sure that everybody is following the law, because in the end, that's the only thing we are supposed to be doing. We lost over 100 staff in the last 3 years, and that has really, really hurt us. We are, I don't want to say we're the smallest we've ever been, because I'd have to go back decades and decades, and I'm sure, but we have 362 people running the national copyright system. And the backlog is most definitely creeping up because of that.
Over 100?
Yes, yes. And it's just not enough, and I think the whole library is suffering a little bit, and we're suffering too. I think for us, the stress is very palpable because we serve a very valuable and very opinionated stakeholder community who have very valuable copyrighted works. So film, software, they have expectations. They are right to have expectations, and they pay fees for services.
Yeah, reasonable expectations. They are I mean, they're not. We're not talking about prima donna expectations.
No, it's true, and I think we are a very public-facing office, so we feel the stress of that on a daily basis. And I have to say, as soon as I became registered, people approached me both internally and externally about their expectations, very politely, and I think very patiently and very appropriately. And I think our stakeholders have been patient, but ultimately we are not interoperable with the commercial marketplace. Our technology doesn't speak to the technology of the marketplace. Our data doesn't speak to data in other databases. So for example, if you are a songwriter and you have a work in ASCAP, which is a songwriter organization, our data and licensing terms should speak to that data, and it's a global marketplace now. So we have to kind of step up and start to look at new paradigms. We do charge fees. And I think what I would like to say about fees is that would be something that it would be terrific for us if we could work with this committee on what Title 17 now says about fees, because it does not allow us, for example, to charge for capital improvements. Does not allow us to charge an aggregate, meaning that I could charge a film company a little more than I could charge a poet. Those might be reasonable adjustments that would allow us to be more self-sustaining. And then I think the catch would be that then the stakeholder community would expect that that money goes into the copyright system. And so we have to have kind of a reasonable conversation
right now,
about.
Into the library?
Well, I think.
wanna- Quickly, because I
Sure.
wanted this very much on the record, but I want to make sure our other members
Yeah.
have an opportunity to ask their questions as well. This is a very important discussion for us to have, so thank you. But do you want to, did you have another point you wanted to
Well,
make?
I was just gonna finish my point that I think, for the Copyright Office, our Bible is the copyright law, and we have to carry that out, and we have to make sure that our measure of success is whether we're meeting the objectives of the copyright system. And how we interact with the greater library on IT and other things is a really important discussion. They've been our home for such a long time. There's no reason we can't make that adjustment, but I think my point would be that we have to make some adjustments because digital has changed everything.
Very good, thank you very much.
Thank you,
Very
Mr.
helpful.
Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Amadei?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. And I guess following up on
And thank you
that-
for your indulgence, appreciate it.
Yeah, thank
No,
you.
that's fine with the ranking member. I was a little upset that my colleague from Alabama that didn't show up yesterday and got to go in front of me today. But following up, yeah, it's like, shit. Anyhow. Following up on the copyright stuff, coming from a checkered past, part of which was on the IP subcommittee, on judiciary, I can just tell, I'm glad to see the conversation going where it is. But this is an area where we have asserted federal jurisdiction. It is our jurisdictional area exclusively. And when you listen to what's going on in the industry in terms of support or not support or uncertainty in terms of the operations, and this is no disrespect to you, but as we sit here and try to be responsible in terms of financial resources to support that operation, I think we need to be mindful that while nobody gets a, whatever you want sort of thing, but this is having a profound impact on an industry over which we have asserted exclusive federal jurisdiction over their activities. And so to assert that jurisdiction on the one hand and then not give them the tools to at least stay abreast of it is something that I will just say bothers me. And I'll stop with that. I'm going to be brief. Dr. Billingsley, I would appreciate it if you could let the folks know in the cafeteria on the top floor of the Madison building that I'm an employee of the United States Congress, so I can get the good deal up there like the rest of the employees. If that's within your jurisdiction, you can see I don't like to miss a lot of meals. If you could give me a special badge or something like that, that says I'm part of the team, that'd be great.
Could we have this coarse political bargaining take place?
Well, I calling Mr. Moran's, lead, I just thought I'd go ahead and do some hardball.
I didn't think mine was quite so self-serving.
If you're nice to me, I'll take you with me up here. Since the voting card doesn't do it.
Let's note that that's two things that I've agreed with Mr. Amadei on. As
since
a
I'm-
patron of the Madison cafeteria myself.
And since I'm that far ahead, I should stop all
I
that.
don't know if we could do all of Congress, but this committee may have to do an
Yeah.
expedition to, look into the matter.
And I'll weather that scandal, so don't worry about it. I'll throw you under the bus. And other than that, I've got some questions, but they're really not program related, so with that, I'll yield back. But I look forward to working with your folks on whatever we can do to kind of make sure that those who come to us in that capacity have some stability and some predictability in terms of that service. Yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Stewart.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and we're being over time. I'll be very brief. I will hold my questions, and most of them have been answered or discussed already. Dr. Billington, to you and your staff, thank you. Honestly, the favorite thing that I have the opportunity to do since I've been in Congress, which has been going on more than a year now, have been your congressional dialogues with Great American Presidents. It's just been those are wonderful evenings. Thank you for doing that. CRS is a great resource for us. We use them all the time in my office.
Pull the mic closer.
Sorry.
Make sure it's on.
Okay, I don't have a mic, so. All right. I'm thanking you for the Great American Presidents and those things, and CRS as well. As a personal note, I'm an author. I've written 18 books. I've been a New York Times bestseller a number of times. I don't think there's anyone who has more affinity for what you do than maybe I do, and have great respect for your efforts as well. I am a little puzzled by one thing, though, and that is in reading your testimony, noting that you're attempting to collect and store 21 billion tweets, knowing that 8 billion of them came from Congress. I see no value at all in that. I would recommend to cancel that program and save the money.
Finally, you've identified some waste products.
And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll yield back.
Well, I want to give the librarian a chance to respond, but I do want to, I'm going to be pretty much tyrannical about time, so we get on to the GAO. But so I want to give you the last word, Professor Billington, but I want to thank you again, for you and your extraordinary team, the amazing job you do every day and have done under very constrained budget circumstances in the last few years. It's very deeply appreciated by this committee, and honestly, I think by every member of Congress and by the people we represent. We have the opportunity, so many occasions, to visit you. It's not one of the highlight points for anybody that comes to Washington, D.C. To go and see that extraordinary institution.
Thank you. Well, Mr. Chairman, it's been created and sustained exclusively by the Congress of the United States, which is a wonderful kind of lesson to the world that the people who make the laws and oversee their execution have created and sustained this enormous treasure chest of human knowledge and of American creativity. Now, the Register of Appropriations is very eloquent in discussing how the modernization for a both and. This is the American way. One technology doesn't make the other obsolete. People thought when movies came in there wouldn't be any interest in plays, that when television came in there wouldn't be any interest in radio. America's a unique culture in the history of the world where we add without subtracting. We add new Americans every year. We don't shoot the old, or it's not at the expense of anybody else. This is an enormously wonderful experiment. Now, in this future plan, this is not just an idle exercise, but it is desired to present to the Congress and discuss with the Congress both the high option of what this place is capable of doing for the United States in this changing world, and doing in a way that will not be outmoded as technology changes. And you've heard some sense of the copyrights needs and concerns. As far as the library is concerned, you could hear similar things from all the other parts of the library too, because this has been a uniform period of tightening down and reducing FTEs. But we didn't want to just come with piecemeal requests. We want to sort all this out and present you with it. Now, as far as copyright is concerned, you heard a very eloquent statement of its needs and concerns. The same thing applies in terms of entering the digital area, and that's why the IT discussion that Deputy Dodaro had to say was a good illustration of how we're going to try to effect synergies where we can and economies as much as we can, but we're going to tell you what we could do, and you're going to determine what we will do. There is so much potential, that is unique potential. I've actually been Chief Executive Officer of 5 federal programs, all funded by the Congress, beginning with the Fulbright program and with various other programs. So I think, and we have, I can tell you that this staff, this is not just ritual saying nice things about your associates. As I've learned, and even more in this future program, is that everybody has constructive things to say, because the length of service here is terrific. The need to transfer the one-of-a-kind knowledge to a new generation is going to be very demanding. There are problems such as or opportunities, I'd say, that we'll present you with, but you can determine what it could be. But I would say that, for instance, on copyright, since that was the example that was discussed at great length, and properly so, from the library's point of view, one of the two things that we have uniquely, that is the closest thing we have to a mint record of American intellectual and cultural creativity, performing arts. I mean, I can rattle off the statistics. We have the biggest collection of movies, maps, music in the world. But the record of American creativity and innovation in so many fields, scientific as well as intellectual and cultural, there is so much we can do with this. And there is so much, but one of the mint record, the closest thing we have, I mean, American creativity is so diverse and all over the place, and it's being recorded and kept in many places. But this is extraordinary because of copyright deposit primarily. It's a unique repository. And a lot of copyrighted things you can only use physically here in the plant because of intellectual property rights. But I can tell you that from the point of view of the library, if we were to lose the 2 copies we receive of all of this creative work of America, that would really be an expense, because their rapid conversion from deposit in terms of physical books into digital things, like everything else, accelerating very rapidly. And if we were to lose that, that would be enormously expensive.
Under no threat, I can assure you.
We get
Exactly.
so anyhow, I'm not saying that anybody's threatening that or anybody, because I don't think anybody is. But I mean, it's just that's just a simple fact in terms of. Anyhow, I think that that I can say that what we're trying to do here is to present to the something that is genuinely consultative management. We're consulting with a very experienced team. We've got the deputy has been doing on a parallel track with the consulting with the people a terrific job of bringing together so that we'll be able to service, for instance, Twitter. Big data. That's a whole new set of
With
problems.
that, I want to bring us to a close, if I may, because
Yes.
we've got the GAO.
Yes, sir.
The
Well,
one
anyhow,
agency I don't want to ever offend.
I want to thank everybody here for all of your comments, and we really look forward, and we're grateful to you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much.
Ranking member, for your interest, support, and also for Mr. Moran, who has actually worked with the Congressional Research Service early in his life. So
Absolutely.
we're very honored to have you with us so long. Thank you.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, you guys ready? If we can, we'll go ahead and bring the subcommittee to order. Now we'll hear from the Government Accountability Office. The GAO is requesting $525 million for fiscal year 2015, an increase of $19.7 million, or 3.9% above the FY 2014 levels. For a return of $100 for every dollar invested in GAO, we're thankful, quite frankly, for your agency's work. The subcommittee's seen firsthand the work you do while we were building the Capitol Visitor Center, continuing work on the Capitol Police Radio Modernization Project, and most recently, the Capitol Power Plant. I want to welcome Mr. Gene Dodaro, the Comptroller General of the United States, back to the committee. We look forward to hearing your testimony. Ms. Wasserman-Schultz, do you have anything you would like to say as an opening statement?
Just briefly, Mr. Chairman, also welcome back, Mr. Dodaro. The thing that concerns me the most is that your agency is responsible for accountability, for ferreting out waste and fraud. You do that very well. The chairman referenced that you were an incredible partner for this subcommittee when we were trying to bring the CDC in for a landing and stop the cost overruns and the missing of deadlines. So the sequester cuts, which were indiscriminate, for your agency in particular, result in penny-wise and pound-foolish decisions. So I'm hopeful that we can focus on rebuilding the GAO so you can recover and do your job as well as you always do. Not to suggest that you haven't, but without forcing you to do it with one hand tied behind your back. Just, Mr. Chairman, that's really all I wanted to say. We have a number of other things that we have to get through today, so I appreciate the opportunity.
You bet.
Thank you.
Mr. Dodaro, your entire statement will be made part of the record. At this point, please summarize your statement, highlight the accomplishments of the GAO, and whatever other points you want to make.
Thank you
Great
very
to
much.
have you here.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. It's good to see you this morning. Ranking Member Wasserman-Schultz, Congressman Harris, Congressman Moran, good morning. First, I just want to say thank you to the subcommittee for your support with our mark for 2014. I was very pleased with that, and it shows a lot of trust and confidence in the GAO, and I believe we've returned on that investment. Mr. Chairman, as you mentioned, we returned in financial benefits to the government over $51 billion last year, which is the $100 to 1 return on investment that you mentioned. In addition, I might add, that figure doesn't include the billions in dollars that our work supported in helping offset the sequester in the 2014 Omnibus Appropriation Bill Act that was just passed. Our work on the aviation security fees, the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, and raising the premiums on the PBGC program, which is on our high-risk list across Congress, all helped offset the sequester. Your GAO contributed to that effort quite a bit. We also have a lot of benefits that aren't able to be quantified. Last year we had over 1,300 other improvements in government programs, activities, public health and safety issues, so I'm very proud of that record, and we'll continue to make sure that we provide returns, both financial and non-financial, to the federal government. Looking forward in 2014, with the support that you've provided us, we're conducting our efforts to rebuild the capacity of GAO. We're trying to restore some of the staff that we lost. We had a 15% cut between 2010 and 2013. We're able to gain back a substantial portion of that staff with the 2014 figures, so we're hard at work trying to do that. The request that we make for fiscal year 2015 is basically to sustain the increase in staff capacity that we will be able to increase in 2014, and to make some modest increases in our aging IT infrastructure and our building systems. Our building's about 60 years old, and so it needs some attending to. And many of these areas we've deferred over the past few years as we've dealt with the cuts from the sequester and other means. We continue with that mark for 2015. We'll be staying level at an FTE level. It's about 2945. Last year we were at 2849, which As I mentioned, last year was the lowest level we've been at since 1935, so we're very appreciative of getting back to the 2945 mark. Ultimately, I believe the optimal level is at 3250 for GAO, but recognizing the constraint that the Congress is operating under at this point, I'm not requesting funds for that. I just want to maintain the capacity that we've been able to build back in 2014 for next year. I think we'll be able to do that and meet the highest priority needs of the Congress. You know, we do work for 95% of the standing committees of the Congress and about 2/3 of the subcommittee. So we've got a broad footprint across the Congress, and I believe I've outreached and met with many chair and ranking members of the committees across the Congress to make sure that we're providing the support and meeting their highest priority needs. And with your support, we'll be able to continue to do that. So thank you very much, and I'd be happy to answer whatever questions you have.
Well, thank you very much, and let me just state for the record, boy, every encounter I've ever had with the GAO has been a good one, particularly on the appropriations staff across the board. The people that I've had the privilege to work with on defense or on interior or on various other subcommittees have always just brought so much to the table, been an incredible value for us. And I suspect while you may not ask for 3,200, I'll bet you Mr. Moran might make that request for you in a minute. But this is a bipartisan appreciation of your work product and the quality of the personnel that you lead. There's a particular area that I wanted to get your input on, and that's your Center for Audit Excellence that you're seeking authority to establish in order to improve your domestic and your international capabilities. You state the center will provide a powerful tool for promoting good governance, transparency, and accountability. Can you tell us a little bit about what your vision is for this, why it's needed, how it would operate, and what amount you've included for a startup budget for this?
Okay, yeah, very good. I appreciate the question very much. In addition to trying to reduce our administrative costs to handle the budget reductions over the past few years, I've been trying to think about ways to exploit our greatest assets. And we have two assets. One's a physical asset in our building, and we've rearranged that, and we have another tenant in, so we're bringing in some revenue that way. The other asset we have is an intangible one, but it's our reputation as one of the premier audit organizations in the world. You know, we set standards by how people have to do audits here domestically. We participate in setting international standards. And there's a great demand for our services, and we don't have the authority right now to receive any funds at all in that area. And so with the globalization of the environment, for example, I've created a working group now in 25 different countries to audit their implementation of international reforms in the financial regulatory structure, so that we can have a global view on how well those reforms that were instituted by the G20 are being implemented on a global basis. The financial problems last time started in the United States. They can start anywhere in the world and affect us in U.S. interest. Same thing with medical products and food safety. 80% of the ingredients for foreign drugs right now come from foreign sources, and about 40% of finished products. We have FDA's oversight on our high-risk list to protect those areas. So what I want to try to do eventually is build the audit capacity so that they can audit other countries' regulatory regimes that will indirectly then help better protect the U.S. public and services. We also provide a lot of foreign assistance overseas, and the audit functions over there are important for accountability and transparency. And the same thing domestically. We get calls all the time from state and local governments to try to help build their audit capacities. It's a modest startup cost in our budget, less than $1 million I would estimate right now to get up and running. My vision is that this would be on a fee basis. It would pay for itself. We would use retired GAO and other auditors to do the work so that we wouldn't detract at all from our ability to support the Congress with our main appropriation. So I think this is a viable business model. I think it'll help U.S. interests in a wide variety of ways, not just help us from a revenue standpoint, but also help the country both domestically and internationally.
Could you tell us a little bit about the fee structure that you might propose to sustain something like this? And because it is an interesting idea.
Yeah, well, it would depend on the service. Sometimes we're asked to provide training courses, which we already have prepared, and we can provide the training, so we would charge labor costs.
for that and any production costs or whatever. I haven't spent a lot of time investing in it until I get the okay from the Congress
Fair enough.
to go forward on it. There's accepted models and fees that we could use to be able to do this, and I don't anticipate any problems. We get dozens and dozens, if not hundreds, of requests every year from not only other national audit offices, but from other countries' legislative bodies who are looking to set up audit organizations to support them like we support the Congress. I mean, we're considered a model in supporting the Congress. A lot of other national audit offices in other countries only work with their Budget Accounts Committee. They only work with one committee in their legislative body, as opposed to what we do, working with all the committees across the Congress. So that's intrigued a lot of legislatures to have better support. So we get a lot of assistance. So we set up whatever fee structure would be to cover our labor costs and our indirect costs in the GAO building. And I hope to generate enough revenues out of this that we'd be able to use it to plow back into some of our training programs to update our training materials, products. So
That was actually a point I was going to ask you and maybe clarify. So you see the fee structure is not just, do you see it as just sustaining the center, or do you see it as an additional source of revenue so you can do other things?
Yes, I see it
The latter.
as the latter.
Very good.
As the latter. Of course, we'd work with the committee. We'd have everything audited, no problems.
You're the last guys I'm worried about on that side.
With transparency, and we provide information. But I think once we get up and running, that's why I started thinking about it. As I mentioned, we've got at least $2 more million a year now in revenue coming in, with the Justice Department coming into our building, part of their entity. And I'm thinking, we can exploit that asset. Our reputation's invaluable, and I think we can, use that to help people who need help around the world, but also, and domestically, but also help ourselves. And, in today's budgetary environment, based on our long-range projections and where the federal government's headed, I'm looking for ways to increase our revenue streams to help provide, more stability in our budget picture going forward.
Very good. Ms. Wasserman-Schultz?
Thank you. Just a couple of quick questions. You have a proposal in your request to allow GAO to use detailees from federal agencies. But I've had plenty of experience with the detailee system. The thing that would concern me, though, is that the reputation that you have for objectivity could be compromised if you bring let's say a DOJ detailee in to analyze the DOJ budget or DOJ issue. And if you bring someone else in who doesn't have that expertise from another agency, that wouldn't make sense. So how would this work?
Right. Basically, I'm not requesting this for GAO's benefit. All right. What happens is the executive branch have developmental programs whereby people have to go out to another agency as part of their professional development with mid-level managers, in some cases upper-level managers, and some of them want to come to GAO to learn how we do our work. And we don't have any authority to accept non-reimbursable
But if we gave you the authority, how would you?
Well, we would definitely not have them work in the area of the agency. several areas. One, the federal government is one of the largest property owners in the world, has hundreds of buildings, including DoD installations along the coastlines, and owns 29% of all the land in the United States, as you well know from your interior responsibilities. Secondly, we're a large insurer. Federal crop insurance costs have been more than doubling over the past few years. The flood insurance program has been on our high-risk list since 2006. Right now, it's $24 billion in the hole that it owes the Treasury Department, and it's highly unlikely under the current premium structure that it'll ever be repaid. I mean, it's not actuarially sound. Bigger Waters Act made some changes to help in that direction. The federal government also provides a lot of disaster aid. And what we've said is the criteria for the disaster aid, whether the federal government decides to intervene or not, really hasn't been updated for many, many years. And so it hasn't even been fully adjusted for inflation over a long period of time. And so the federal government right now, we estimate if it had been adjusted for inflation, there'd be about 25% less disasters that the federal government would be involved in, as opposed to the state and local governments having the capability to take on that money as well, that area as well. And also right now, the federal government doesn't budget for major disasters. The only budgets for disasters $500 million or less, and with a lot of the extreme weather events we have, there's really no budgeting. So in order to help pay for disasters, we're borrowing money. I mean, basically, and it's not in any of the long-range simulations by GAO or CBO or others. I mean, it's really just an exposure out there that the federal government has. So we've also said that there's not enough strategic planning. A lot of federal agencies are on the playing field here. There needs to be better coherent strategic planning and working with state and local governments. The federal government invests a lot in infrastructure costs. And so what we're saying is if the federal government could advise state and local governments that we could build our infrastructure smarter so it would be more resilient. We spent a lot of money after Katrina elevating bridges and doing other things that could have been done earlier if people had thought about that area. Same thing with the experience in New York City and how they're handling things after Superstorm Sandy. And so we're trying to get the federal government to be smarter initially and better protect its assets and its investments.
Very good. I just have one other question. Thank you. Very excellent response, General. We are under increased threat from a cyber attack. We see it in the private sector, and we're undoubtedly going to see it to a broader extent in the public sector. Have you ever done any studies in terms of the need for redundancy in the event of a cyber attack on our most essential federal facilities?
Yeah, we've been focused on this area a long time. In 1997, we actually added it to the high-risk list, government-wide. This is the first time we ever designated anything government-wide high-risk. In 2003, I think, we added critical infrastructure protection, including all the assets most of the assets are in the private sector hands. And so we've been looking at that. We've done some work looking at the internet, for example, and the need for areas there. I'd have to go back and I'll provide a detailed answer for the record, but it's something I'm really focused on at the GAO. There needs to be more partnerships between the public sector and the private sector. It's one area where we don't have enough of a trained workforce to be able to, we've noted gaps, critical skill gaps across the federal government with the right people and skills to maintain this area. There needs to be some legislation. For example, the Department of Homeland Security has a responsibility now for overseeing all other federal agencies, but it doesn't have the authority, and that needs to be rectified. And so there's a lot of areas. And the redundancy one is certainly a key one, but I'll give you a specific answer on that aspect of it for the record.
Well, thank you for your excellent testimony, Mr. Dodaro. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Congressman Moran.
Ms. Roy?
Hi.
Thank you for being here today. 3 just quick questions. You get hundreds of requests from Congress and others required by law. What's the system of prioritizing how you respond and in what order?
Oh, sure. Yeah, we have written congressional protocols that we've worked out with the Congress over the years. There are 3 priorities. One, the priority 1 is a request that's in a law, as part of a mandate, or in a congressional resolution, committee report, or conference report. So those are first priority. Second priority are requests from committee chairs and ranking members. They're treated the same, reinforce our nonpartisan status. And then priority 3 are requests from individual members of Congress. Right now, we haven't done a request from an individual member of Congress or had the resources probably for over a decade. So for right now, if you want to get in the queue, and we get anywhere from slightly under 900 to maybe 1,100 requests a year from the Congress, you have to get a committee to support you to be able to do it. Now, I do have broad statutory authority to initiate work on our own accord if we see a gap or a particular issue. So I listen to what all members have to say.
But I have to be really nice to my chairman in order to get something.
That's the best way to do it. That's the best way to do it.
Okay.
Would you like to make an exception for this committee?
So you asked for an increase in funding for IT and building and security services. Can you tell us what improvements need to be made to your IT system and your building structures, but between the two, which request is in more diamond?
Well, it's like choosing which child you love the best,
My children ask me that question all the time.
I'd say I love everybody equally, So, but let me tell
Love
you
you the same, but different.
With the, right, that's a good answer. Love to remember that. But in the IT area, our network infrastructure is aging. Our switches and routers are over 9 years old. Our end user devices, our laptops are over 5 years old. And in this day and
Which means
age,
they're just archaic.
right, and we're bringing in new people who are, used to, more up-to-date technology, and so we really need to do that. What we've been doing, quite frankly, I've prioritized people over technology during these times of budgetary decline. I had 2 priorities: maximize our support to the Congress, minimize the effect on GAO employees. So we've had to defer some of these investments, and we're getting to the point where we can no longer do that. The building infrastructure, our building was built in 1951, so it's several decades old. We've replaced pieces of different parts of things, but we're doing a comprehensive assessment right now. But a lot of the heating and cooling systems for the building, it's a large building, and are in need of repairs, particularly the chillers to cool the building during a period of time. So we need to make some investments.
We're
only asking,
sorry.
we're only asking for about $1 million for both areas for increase over the 2014 amount of money. So it's strategic. We're looking for savings mostly within both areas. We're cutting back. We just went to a new contract to manage the building. We own the building. It's not a GSA building. New contract for facilities management is going to save us a couple $1 million. So we're getting savings that we're plowing back into these investments. We just need the $1 million more that's for both areas combined.
Okay, I go back.
Thank you, Mr. Stewart.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you for your testimony, your excellent witness. 2 things, and I think we can do them fairly quickly, they're very general. If I were a business owner, and I used to be a business owner, so I can understand that managing personnel is very difficult sometimes, but if I had a third of my executive team that was eligible for retirement and nearly a fifth of my other senior analysts, that would keep me awake at night. Can you respond to that a little bit? I mean,
Sure.
Ms. Wasserman Schultz talked about that a little bit.
Right.
But could you address that more directly and
Sure.
how you plan to deal with that?
Sure. I've been working on succession planning now at the GAO for about 15 years. So, we've turned over our senior executive corps probably about 70% during that period of time. We have a well-structured senior executive candidate development program. So we have about a dozen people that are right now in acting senior executive development roles. We give them extra training, so we're preparing that cadre to replace the people. So we've upticked the number of candidate development programs. So we have one a year now. So we have a pipeline of people within the organization that, you know, I feel confident can move up with the proper training in that area. We also have statutory authority to do what we call knowledge transfer, or you know, where I can bring back retired GAO executives for specific projects for specific periods of time, and their annuities not offset, which is the general rule. I can waive the offset and bring them back. So I do that strategically if I have difficult areas to do it. But the most important thing, though, the reason, you know, I won't say I don't lose any sleep, but I don't lose a lot of sleep, is because we have terrific people that have been coming through the system. That's why I was so worried last year before this committee. I mentioned I felt like a college football coach where the seniors were leaving and there were no freshmen and sophomores coming in. So that's why I'm so grateful for this support for 2014.
Although, if you do have to bring those senior executives back, it's much more expensive to bring them back on a contract basis. Is that?
Well, I don't use contract. We just pay them for the salaries. Under this thing, we don't pay any actually it's cheaper because you don't pay any benefits. They're already on the government-wide benefits.
So these aren't individuals who have retired and you're asking?
They're retired, yeah. Some of them are retired. I can bring them back, put them, they're regular GAO employees. We pay their salaries and that's it.
Okay. So it sounds like it's worth noting, but not a concern of yours right now. It sounds
Well,
like
it's
you're taking the steps to
yeah,
deal with it.
yeah. I mean, I believe we have efforts underway to do it. I won't say it's not a serious problem, in that you know, part of our value is having institutional knowledge across the government, but I'm managing it the best we can. And sometimes we'll recruit from the outside to bring a senior executive in. They don't all have to come up through the system.
Yeah, and what you do is too important for us not to be assured that there's, you know, continuity built into that. And it sounds, again, like you've taken appropriate steps to deal with that over the past year.
Yeah, well, one of the, Congressman, my job, you have a 15-year tenure, so I have 12 years left. So I have a vested interest to make sure I'm not the only person left at the end of the 12 years. And I have a well-functioning organization there.
Very quickly, could you elaborate on, you say that the GAO is one of the best investments in the federal government, and you have this figure of $51.5 billion. Help me understand how you come to that conclusion.
Sure. Some examples. We count where the federal government's cut back on investments or saved money, for example, or enhanced revenues. For example, we've been raising concerns about the production risk for the Joint Strike Fighter over here. So as a result of our concern, the Department of Defense has cut back on its production schedule. So they've saved billions of dollars as a result of following our advice. We mentioned the DOD that it was very expensive for them to base in Europe, that they ought to re-examine that. They re-examined it, they've cut back now and brought some brigades back, saved about $2 billion in that area. In the housing area, we looked at the Federal Housing Administration and where they were allowing seller finance, support for the programs. We said, and we did a comparison, so you're losing money. Every time you allow seller financing, you have a higher rate of delinquency. So Congress said, no more seller financing, save several $billions.
So, so for those examples, or the majority of your work, are they a result of a request from Congress or from someone in the executive? Do you ever initiate that type of analysis yourself?
Oh yeah, we initiate quite a bit on ourselves eventually, and then it becomes a part of what the Congress asked for. For example, most of the things on the high risk list are things that we started doing ourselves, and now the Congress mandates we do every year. Like we do an analysis of the DoD weapons systems portfolio. We do one now of NASA's NASA's investment portfolio, space portfolio. A lot of the work, about a third at least of our financial benefits come from working on these high risk areas to try to bring problems down. One area is improper payments. We initiated work there as a result of financial audits. Congress has passed legislation. Right now, before we started work in that area, the federal government didn't even know the size of its improper payment problem. Right now, it's over $100 billion a year, half of it Medicare and Medicaid, and so it's being measured now and managed, and as a result can bring those things down. So I'd like to, if I had the level of resources that I mentioned at the 3250 level, I would make more investments on our own to help identify other opportunities for savings, but right now I'm focused, the highest priority is on meeting the Congress's needs.
Okay, and so just in conclusion, just for, make sure I understand,
Sure.
you're not frustrated in the sense that you see opportunities that you could go after, but you're waiting to be directed or requested to do that. You have the latitude to initiate those on your
Yes,
own.
yes,
Okay.
yes. I have the latitude, but again, I don't have as many resources as I would like
So
to
you're
be able
limited by
to do.
resources, but not by targets.
That's correct.
Yeah, okay.
That's correct.
All right, and just finally, can you give me an idea of what percentage, just roughly, how much of these studies are initiated internally versus, you know, are requested
Right,
from
yeah.
Congress or other?
Right, 96% is either a mandate or a congressional request.
Okay.
So 4% on our own. Now, it's a little bit, you got to take into account, we develop a strategic plan for serving the Congress. We just updated our plan and issued it at the end of February for 2014 to 2019. So a lot of what we mentioned to the committees across the Congress that we think is important for us to look at, they then request the work. So a lot of that 96% are things that we think are important, they agree with, and send the request letters in.
So if we doubled your expenditures, could you save us $1 trillion then?
I'd try hard.
If we do what they say. Well, in typical GAO fashion, we started you late and you finished ahead of time. Typical, but first, do any other members of the committee have any additional questions? Thank you, terrific presentation. And again, thanks very much for the work that you do. We're very, very grateful.
Thank you all very much.
We're adjourned.